Pastels, creating bubbles with Mr. G. All right, so we're going to start out by tracing 2 or 3, maybe 4 different circles of different shapes. And you've all done this before, probably. If you haven't, refer to season 1. And so I'm going to speed this up. We all know how to trace circles. If you have a hard time, I can help you out with that. So we're going to start out with a white pastel. I've actually broken mine in half just so I can make it a little bit smaller. And I tip it on its side. This is very important. Put it on its side and then gently go along the curve of the circle. Not a straight line, but a nice curved line. And just do this gently. You can always go over it. Don't do it really hard. Just do it very gently at first. And then you'll have these kind of C-like shapes. Once I do that, I'm going to gently take my finger and just roll over the chalk. And we've done this before with pastels. It's kind of a smudging technique. So you kind of go back and forth, and then you can kind of go inside closer to the inside of the circle or the bubble. And you can see how that creates this cool little reflection. Creates some depth. There's my dog, Farley. Hi, Farley. He's sniffing the bubbles. And so yeah, continue on doing that. And now watch how I go all the way around the bubble. That'll actually pull that chalk all the way around and give you just a little bit of white on the other side as well. It gives it a little bit of depth, a little bit of a three-dimensional look. Now I've chosen a different color. I like this green, kind of a green-blue. And I'm going to use the tip of my pastel this time, kind of the sharp corner of it. And notice how I'm doing a much thinner line. So I'm going to choose one side of it and just maybe do a quarter of the bubble, maybe a half. Probably a quarter is a little bit better. And now I'm going to choose another color that's a little different. All of these are kind of lighter colors. I want to make sure that you're picking a lighter color because these are reflections of colors that are around. So I've picked kind of a light pink, and I'm just kind of hugging the inside of each of the bubbles. Notice how I'm doing that with just the corner of my pastel. Take your time doing this, and again, just follow the inside of the bubble. Not a straight line, but a curved line. And once we get that done, then we're going to kind of go gently over it. This time we're not going to be pulling in so much. We're just going to go over it. We won't be doing a big circle. Again, with your finger, just gently go back and forth on them. You can always go back with some more pastel later if it's not quite sharp enough. So now we have a couple of pink highlights. I'm using a different finger because I didn't want to mix that pink with the green, so I'm using a different finger to go over this. And you can see it's already turning out to look like a bubble. I mean, we could stop right here and people would say, hey, that's a nice bubble. Now I've chosen one of my brightest colors next to white, which is my yellow, and I'm just going to make some tiny little highlights here. As if there's some yellow reflection going on somewhere. These are the colors that will probably stand out the most because they are closest to white. And now I'll take my finger and just gently go over them, really just gently, because I want those highlights to stand out a little bit more than the other things, the other colors. Now I've gone back to my white pastel, again using the corner, and I'm going to start creating some light reflections. And you'll see that this is where the realism is going to really pop out. When we look at bubbles, we see these reflections of the brighter lights around the bubbles. So I'm going to just start with a couple of just tiny little lines. I won't add too many of them. Maybe a few here and there on each bubble. Sometimes when we look at bubbles and we're inside of a room, we can see a reflection of perhaps a window. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to put 4 little marks that kind of look a little bit like a window with 4 panes. And of course, this is not something that you have to do. I'm just thinking in my mind, what is surrounding the bubble right now? And I'm just thinking, oh, maybe it's a window. So you can see that I'm not being very specific about the window. It's not completely square. It's just a bit of a resemblance of a window pane. So if you'd like to do that, you can certainly try to. Otherwise, I'm just taking a couple of little marks of white as reflection, and that adds a very good hint of realism when we're doing these. And there we have 3 bubbles in under 6 minutes. Now I'm going to show you a video of the very first time that I did this, the first video that I recorded. So I realized that when I started with this, my pastel piece was way too big to be able to do use the side of it for this bubble. So I did what anybody would do, break it in half, and it worked out just fine. And being that this was my very first one, I didn't really know how many bubbles I should do. I think that I was a little bit overwhelmed by having so many bubbles, so I think you should probably do maybe 2 or 3 or 4 to start out with, and then if you want to do more, then you can do more a little later on. Now I'm actually going to draw a bubble by looking at a bubble. So I wanted to see if I could get the background. I probably could have used colored paper on this and it would have been a little bit easier. So I'm just going to mark out a little bit of the shapes that I see. I'm drawing what I see now, looking at the bubble, and I see that there's this light area on either side, and it looks like maybe it's a reflection of a tree or something like that. I'm not even sure what it is, but I'm just going to try to draw what I see and kind of use the colors that I think are pretty close to what I see in there. I think that the green could definitely have been a lot lighter, and so I'm adding a little bit lighter in there. Probably could have done a little bit more. But again, this is my first time doing this with a colored background too. I'm just adding some highlights, just looking at the highlights, drawing what I see. Noticing that the area right there could be a little bit lighter. So I went back in there and kind of smudged that in. I decided to draw one more and add just a little bit more color because the bubble next to it actually had quite a bit of color in it. So just experimenting with some colors now. Hopefully this gives you a little bit of an idea of how to draw a bubble with pastels. Thanks for watching.